and this is our phenomenon that we're really interested in. And so just to make sure we have the terminology right, we call this a lot of different things. It's called the outcome variable, the dependent variable, the consequence. We usually call it y when it's just labeled with a letter. So this thing that is what we are hoping to explain, right? But remember that in order to get an explanation, a why, we're looking for what causes our phenomenon. And so what we add is an x variable that causes our y variable. And this, I mean, this seems really simple, right? We can look at this picture and we know that, what can we tell from this, right? There's a relationship. We see a relationship. And that's why we use causal models, because it's sort of clear to tell that we're talking about a relationship between those two variables. So the variable that's causing our phenomenon of interest, we call the predictor variable, the independent variable, the antecedent, x. I just have listed those because you'll hear, there are a lot of other names too, but those are some of the more commonly used ones. Okay, so when we look at this picture, we see an entire causal story being told. And the story is that job dissatisfaction causes high turnover. And so, can we all understand? I mean, that makes sense, right? If I hate my job, then I might want to leave. Like, this isn't groundbreaking, right? So what we're seeing is a basic causal model, and we're going to develop a little bit more. So does anyone have any question about these two boxes and the arrow? We're going to talk about moderators and mediators now. Is everybody familiar with those two concepts? Feel confident about them? Okay. So we'll talk about moderators first. Moderators are our z variables. And in statistics, we talk about interaction effects. But what a moderator does is it tells us that this third variable changes the relationship between our x and y. Okay? So in this case, this is a fake, I just came up with this notion of external opportunities. And the argument I'm making here is that job dissatisfaction leads to high turnover if there are external opportunities, external job opportunities. But if there aren't, so if there is a low number of external job opportunities, then turnover will go down. So when we see a model like this, what the moderator is telling us is that some third variable changes the relationship between x and y. Does that make sense? Are we clear on that?
So it kind of makes the relationship more or less true.
That's right. And so, in fact, in statistics, what they'll teach you is that the interaction effects suggest that the relationship between x and y depends on specific levels of the moderating variable. So in other words, this relationship might be weak at a low level of external opportunities, but it might be strong at a high level of external opportunities. Okay, so we have kind of that notion down of moderators. Okay. I've added this box to show that all models have to be bounded by the context and conceptual framework in which it's presented. So when we say that this relationship exists, if I don't also include in my argument the bounds for that argument, you would think that I'd be saying, well, this relationship always exists. But in fact, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that I don't have any idea when this relationship exists, but it might exist somewhere. And so good scholarship will sort of bound the relationship, and it will say within this certain demographic, or maybe within Fortune 500 companies, maybe in Western countries, this relationship holds.
At this pay scale.
Yeah. So I bring it up in terms of moderators because often we can find new moderators by looking at the contextual boundaries. So I could have phrased this relationship as dissatisfaction and turnover with external opportunities just outside of the box and not part of it. But then all we would know is that this relationship occurs within the particular, so if we had done a study where there were high external opportunities, then we would know that this relationship occurs, but only in a context of high external job opportunities. But by making that a moderator, by bringing that factor inside a box, what we're testing now is the degree to which that issue matters. And so before, we just knew that the relationship only occurred in high external job opportunity situations. Now we know that the relationship is dependent on that issue, and we know that it fluctuates depending on the amount of external job opportunities. So we can, when we see a boundary, and when you're reading academic articles, and it talks about the contextual factors in which the discussion is based, think, oh, this is an opportunity for a potential study. They've done their study, but they've only done it in publicly held firms. So maybe if we bring in a privately held firm, we can see if the relationship changes depending on public versus private. Or maybe, they've done this in Western countries, maybe we can take it to China and see if the relationship changes. So we can take these contextual factors and bring them in as moderators, and it's an opportunity for us to do new research and really expand our knowledge and the knowledge of the field. Okay, so that's enough about moderators. How lost are we? Have I lost anybody? Yeah.
Let me just clarify, so the boundary, you're saying the boundary is context?
Yes,
Okay.
that's exactly right. So this boundary is the context in which this relationship holds.
And you usually read about that like in the methods section where they discuss who the participants are.
That's right. And good scholars will say, these were our participants, and we expect that they are sufficiently similar to, and then they would sort of lay out what population they expect that their sample represents. And because of that, they're sort of spelling out, okay, we expect that our study applies to this larger population. Any other questions about that? Okay, so let's talk about mediators then. Again, this mediator that I've added is just sort of something that I came up with. It's not, I didn't pull this out of an article, but I chose it because I think it will help us understand. So we call mediators z variables as well, so be careful with that. The mediators affect the relationship in a different way. What a mediator does is that it serves as both a y variable for our x and an x variable for our y. So what that means is that this argument is a complete causal argument, and this argument is a complete causal argument. Okay? And so what we could think about this, we think about the logic behind it. We could say job dissatisfaction causes me to look for a new job, right? And we could say that it's actually looking for a new job that causes me to leave my company. So when we find mediators in relationships, what we learn is that it isn't dissatisfaction that's directly causing turnover, but there's something in the middle. X is causing some mediating variable, and that mediating variable is causing the phenomenon that we care about. And this is helpful for scholars to identify, because if I'm in an organization and I find out that I thought it was just job dissatisfaction that's causing turnover, but now I find out that there's a mediating variable, all I do is install a filter that blocks monster.com, and I've solved my problem. And I mean, that's kind of a funny example, right? Of course, we can't block people's, overall access to the internet. But the point is that an intervention then occurs at a different place. We can turn our attention to how to deal with a mediating variable if we want to change our phenomenon of interest. Okay? So,
or we could recommend that you can't change the mediating variable, and so your intervention still has to comply.
yeah, that does happen. So if we find that we actually can't change, we can't directly affect our x, then we might look for, if we don't already know the original x variable, we might look for an antecedent, right? So that we can change this one, and then by the causal chain, affect our sort of overall phenomenon of interest.
Yeah, because the presence of a mediator doesn't inherently say that the original x no longer causes y. It just says that the causal relationship is mediated. It is through another phenomenon.
Well, so in a fully mediated model, it does say that x does not cause y directly. It only causes y in so much as it causes our mediator.
Mm-hmm.
So if we can change that relationship, then if we can change this relationship right here, then x will no longer cause y. Now it is the case that most models are partially mediated, and so there's kind of a direct connection as well. Yeah.
You need to be careful about what you're searching for in your research, because it depends on what angle you take looking at this. And you can look at this at a very fine-grained level, and you can get a lot of mediating variables. You can look at just dissatisfaction and turnover. You need to know what you're trying to do. You need to know what's appropriate in the situation to know what level you go down to.
Yeah, that's a great point, because there could be a lot of mediators in here, right? Thanks, Chad. So, do we sort of have the moderators versus mediators down? Any lingering questions?
Yeah. Now in statistics, this is called multivariate analysis, right?
No, so multivariate, we have And there